Welcome back to the Eclectic Collection. I hope your 2021 is treating you well. Today is episode 12, and we're going to call it Fire Hazard. Don't forget to become an eclector because all the cool kids are doing it. So if you haven't signed up already on your preferred platform, then please do so. We do have a website as well if you want to take a look at that. I want to talk to you today about my very good friend who shall remain nameless, but he knows who he is. So May 15th, 1992, having gone to the largest Catholic high school in North America, you can figure that one out. I don't think it is anymore, but it was. We used to have this event called Red and Blue Day, and it was a really large carnival kind of situation that was like a cool day, like a field day for the kids. And I happened to be a senior that year. My buddy was a junior. And it was just like so much work to do. And of course, I was involved in that because what wasn't I involved in? But we built like a wall that was mimicked after Pink Floyd's The Wall. And it was like a whole obstacle course situation. And there were carnival rides. And, you grab a hot dog and there's sack races and all sorts of baloney that you would normally have at a carnival and knock over the little milk crates and, pick up the ducky and get a prize, all that kind of stuff. And our big to do was, you could play games. There was pickup games of basketball in the gym, and it was pretty much an indoor-outdoor thing. And it was just like a treat for the kids. And that year was especially cool for us because, we were seniors and we really put a lot into building it. And the big finale was this wall, like we called it the Wall of Death, but it was built on looked like the Screaming Man from Pink Floyd's The Wall, and it was all an obstacle course with like a mud pit and like swing ropes, and you had to do the little footsie things with the football drills, and then you had to crawl under stuff and over ropes and swing and dive and go through dirt and get muddy. It was disgusting, but it was cool, and we spent weeks putting it together. And I did more on the publicity side and helping out with just getting everything together for it, more logistics. That was my speed, but a lot of my very good friends built it and took the time with the stage crew and stuff to put it all in place. And it was really, it was a good event. It was fun, but it was also like everybody was toward the end of the year, senior year, a lot of camaraderie. So it was a positive thing, and unfortunately this very positive day would end up going horribly awry. So I'm just kind of telling you the backstory to get to where we are. So my buddy goes, and he's a junior at the time, and he was screwing around with some of his friends at the bottom of the hill, making a little bet like, oh, I bet I could do the obstacle course faster than you. Classic, male goof around teenage stuff. And, they were, okay, well, let's see. So, of course, they go to take their turn to go to the obstacle course, which was packed that day. It was a total success, and everybody loved it. And it all went bad about 3 hours in. So he actually wrote about this in my Seven Dreams book. He went up to do it, gets through most of the course, does fine. He's a super athlete, great guy, and has no problem. And then at the end, where there's a swing rope over a little moat that we made, and then you're supposed to swing to the mud pit, jump up, get to the wall, climb over the wall, and then you're home free. There's a quick little stretch, and then you break the banner and you win. They time you, of course. He swings on the rope, gets through, and I guess he, everybody's muddy and gross and wet. So the way he fell, instead of swinging over to get to the safe zone, he missed. And, a lot of people missed because it was muddy and gross, but he missed and fell into the mud pit, but he kind of belly flopped. And the way he fell, I would say we maybe dug 6 to 8 inches. It wasn't a deep terrain there, but a ravine rather. But the problem was he snapped his spinal cord when he fell. And obviously we did not know. And he was kind of a jokester, so he wasn't getting up, but he was the kind of guy to pretend he was dead. So, or make a scene to be funny. And we were like, yeah, okay, come on, get up. Yeah, okay, get up. Hello. And then we realized something was wrong. Thank God many of the kids were EMTs, paramedics, volunteer fire people helped out. Of course, our school nurse and we had people on staff and police and everything there. So we were able to get to him quickly, and we just ran a hose over. But the problem is, when somebody's in trauma, you don't want to move them. So now it's if he stays in the face first, his whole nose and mouth are underwater in mud and he can't breathe. He's going to die from choking to death or drowning. If we do flip him, did we break his neck? Did he break his neck? We don't know. Was the snap on contact? What happened? I think his body, psychosomatically, misread the depth, and then obviously he physically hit and it snapped his neck back. And it was his fourth and fifth vertebrae, which is not good. So apparently, from what I'm told, because now I know a lot about nerve damage that I would have rather not known, your C1, 2, 3, if you snap anything like that, you're literally dead. So thank God it was not that, but I believe it was his fifth and sixth. So there's 4, 5, and 6, and his fifth and sixth were damaged, broken. And then he had other damage, like in lumbar, but that was the one that like made it a problem. So the guys run over, and a couple girls run over that are in the local fire department and EMTs and paramedics studying to be and whatnot, and they get there first, and they pull him out, they hose him off, they clear his airways, they get him to breathe, but he's unconscious, covered in mud, and he's not answering, and you could tell like all of a sudden his body's swelling. It's a bad scene. So an ambulance was on site. They couldn't get the ambulance down to the pit because he was on, like, we had done it on the field, and it was the lower field instead of the football field. It was like near the soccer field. And when I tell you that by the time it was like telephone, telegraph, telestudent, by the time that hit, he came out, they got him out, and we were waiting on transport. It was total chaos to pin drop silence in about 2 minutes. And I felt that you could palpably hear, even inside in the gym, absolutely nothing. It was the weirdest thing, and it was super ominous and scary. And then out of nowhere, like Billy Joel's Goodnight Saigon, you hear a very soft helicopter get louder and louder and louder. And here comes this surreal experience of a chopper landing on the soccer field, and EMT guys running down the hill, stabilizing his neck, getting him back up the hill, and putting him in a chopper and medevacing him to Thomas Jefferson Hospital in Philadelphia. His mom and dad are at work. They don't know. I'm one of his good friends nearby, and the girl he was dating was on my yearbook staff, also a junior, that I was good friends with. She's, of course, in tears. So, being the kid that I was, they grabbed me and said, okay, we're going to make a phone call, tell the mom and dad, can you meet them? So we like raced out shortly thereafter, and, they got him stabilized. And he would go on to recover immensely, except unfortunately by technicality, he is a quadriplegic now by technicality. But I say that because he regained like an incredible amount. I mean, I don't know the exact percentage, but I want to say 74, 75% of his upper body is, mobile and okay. And he only regained about 17% of his lower body. So he has feeling and everything, back in the upper part, but he just lacks some defined motor skills. It's a shame because he had the nicest handwriting, and he can't, do things like that. He has to have adaptations, but he's totally functional. It was just really tough, and he's in a motorized chair. He went on to do almost a year. He was months in Jefferson, and then he went on to McGee Rehab for a year. And it was just, by the time he got out, like he got, better and better, of course. But it's a hard thing to deal with. He was an athlete. He had a scholarship waiting for him, a lot of really simple things that you don't think about that change his life immediately. So you're not generally thinking about specific things unless you're in that situation. And I feel like my life is full of those specific things because I know a lot of different people with a lot of specific issues, and that's fine. But the general world does not think about those specific people. And I kind of get it. I mean, if you're not, I didn't think about that. I mean, yes, I wouldn't have parked in a handicapped spot without a placard, and I wouldn't be a jerk and cover up something that would help somebody that was in mobility issues at all, like as a general citizen. But you don't think about it until you're in it. And then when you're in it, it's very difficult because the average person goes about normal and doesn't think about you might not be able to open that door, or that door is not automated, or you can't pick up a cup or something simple, or signing your name is a very intricate thing now, or you need some apparatus in order to be able to do that simple task that you could do. And forget about personal hygiene, grooming, basic getting around in and out of a bed or off of a couch or a sofa or in and out of a chair. I mean, that's a whole different world. So there's so much that goes on to this. And I literally went to, as I call it, rehab school. His mom and dad were a little fragile after it, and I was close to the family, so I would go and sit in on these classes, which were really great. And like I have to say, as far as like I can never say enough about, first responders and medical people, because I have a soft spot for them. As my brother was a fireman, and, my brother-in-law was a policeman and a fireman, a volunteer. And, my sister's a pharmacist, and I've just got, that kind of background in my family with people that it's like we're a bunch of teachers and helpers in some way or shape or form. But, it's a different way. I got a lot of friends that are nurses that it's a different way of looking at things, like being able to help people literally physically. And with that, Jeff was fantastic. I mean, as far as my experience, which thank God was, limited, but for what they did for my buddy, it was a fantastic hospital. The people were super nice. I mean, we were there all hours just to be with them, and they would never bother us or anything. And they would help him any way they could. They were truly invested in his recovery, and so was McGee. And it was funny because the transition was tough because they were going to be obviously harder on you in rehab, but they were firm, but they were very sweet to him, and they were very helpful to the family. And they had these classes that you could go basically like learn how to adapt your life as an able-bodied person to your now incapable physically friend who's mentally totally capable. And I say that on purpose because so many people, handicapped became handicapable, give or take, in golf. And it bothers me because people assume if you have a wheelchair, like something's not right with you in the head. I don't get where that came from. I think it's like an old bad stereotype from, people putting people in closets and not talking about their existence if they had an issue, which is ridiculous to me. Because being a teacher, like obviously I'm going to see, kids with, problems with sight and problems walking and problems with speech and hearing problems. And what are you going to do? Say, sorry, kid, you can't learn? No, you're going to figure it out, adapt it, give them bigger print if they need it, give them another set of books if they need it, accommodate, adapt, give them something that they can to be handy capable, as they like to say. But mentally, there's nothing wrong with somebody that has a physical handicap. And people just see a chair, and it's funny how they react. And it's either like this lame face of pity, or it's almost like confusion, or disgust, which is sickening to me. But there's a lot of people out there that they don't know how to react. And that's okay if you're not comfortable because you feel bad that you're going to make that person feel bad. But don't act like that outwardly. Offer assistance, be helpful, and just treat them like a normal human. That's the best thing you could do. If you're, a quiet person, that's fine. You could just nod and smile like you normally would with any other person on the road and walk by. And if you're outgoing and don't shut up like me, then, be normal and start a conversation just like they were anybody else on the elevator or whatever. And if you can help them, because you'd be surprised how many people do not. Which this is just where I get started on this whole pet peeve of mine. Eventually, when he would get out of McGee, or prior to, they would get him ready with these little weekends. And it was like a weekend pass. And we would try and, get him home. And at first we just get him home so he could be in his own house, which had been converted completely. And they took their garage and made it into a room for him. And everything was, handicap accessible because his room was upstairs, and obviously he wasn't going to be able to do that in a standard 2-story colonial. So they had renovated, and by the time he got out or was able to come home for weekends, we would have these little mini parties and people come see him and everything. And then eventually it happened to be winter before he was able to, so we go from May to like almost like January, February, almost like now, to be able to get him to even sustain being around other people, for immunity and all that kind of stuff. And eventually we were able to try and venture out, go to dinner, go to the movies. And like, that's the first challenge that kind of comes up is, where do you take a recently handicapped guy? You didn't think about that before. You wanted to go bowling, you went bowling. You wanted to go, putt-putt, you went to putt-putt. And you wanted to go to an escape room, you went to an escape room. They weren't a thing back then, by the way. But, you could go out and you wanted to go paintball, or if you wanted to go, walk around the mall, or, dinner and restaurants are pretty accessible for the most part. Although I got to tell you, they're a lot better now than they were. A lot more accommodating. But, the movies is kind of where we ended up a lot because it's the only thing that we could all still be together, not exclude him or anything. I mean, a simple hayride at Halloween time wasn't an option anymore. Which, the more I think about it, I really don't get why. Because, granted, a big motorized chair is thousands of, pounds of weight and whatnot and batteries. But if, there's transfer chairs that are very light that we could have potentially gotten him on to the car or the big truck, or like had a ramp or something. And I just feel like people don't think about that because it's not the majority of people, and one size does not fit all. So I like that they at least started saying one size fits most, but that's even kind of a stretch depending on the thing that you're talking about. And the movies it was. So we started going to movies a lot. And at the time, Bennigan's was open. God bless Bennigan's in Springfield because I love them, and I probably should have owned that place. So we were always there, and I knew everybody there. So they were beyond accommodating. I remember it snowed and iced like crazy that year. It would go on to get worse in 96, but this was like a precursor. So first of all, I got a guy in a wheelchair who's freezing, that's not used to being outside at all because he's been in a hospital in a controlled climate environment. And we're at a restaurant trying to go in, and the entire handicap accessibility ramp is blocked. And there's spots for me to park in to drive him because he didn't have his van yet. He would go on to get a van, and he drives and is totally capable now. But at the time, we took him in. I put the placard up, and I could get him out of the car and into the chair. And that's a whole level too, because poor guy, he had to like deal with literally being manhandled by all of us. And of course, we love him, we care about him. It wasn't a question, but it is a shot to your dignity when you need somebody to suddenly do for you, especially to that level. And we're close, and it was fine, and he took it well, but it's a lot to get used to. So he, of course, would joke about it because he was funny. His token line is "Don't make me get up," which I still laugh every time I hear him say it. But we were getting him in the chair, and then I realized, okay, guys, we're gonna have to lift the chair because there's a gigantic snowbank that the plow company dumped right on the handicap ramp. And there's no other ramp but the one token blue one next to the handicap spots. And I thought to myself, wow, what an idiot. Like, who did that? And then, I only thought that because now I had to think about it. And that thought hit me later. And of course, I'm getting angry and crazy and I'm impatient. So this whole time, so we lift him over I'll say normal people's step. There's only one step up. And then there were 3 steps up into the restaurant. So we just carried him in that chair. My buddies inside saw us working and came out with shovels. They didn't even put coats on. They came out with shovels, and all the Bennigan's crew started shoveling snow and ice and throwing snow and ice all over to clear the path, or even offered to take him in the kitchen, which was flat around back. Now, I get it. It's obviously not ideal to roll somebody in a kitchen, and, it wasn't meant to be insulting. It was meant to be accommodating, but that's all they could do at the time. We were cool. We got him in. It was fine, and I appreciated their help, but I knew them. And I think that they helped him because they knew him, and it was a personal thing. Because a lot of other restaurants wouldn't even think about that or do that, and we just couldn't take them to those places. And even if they were, quote-unquote, accessible, the truth is they weren't. I mean, think about the average experience if you've ever ended up in a handicapped bathroom. Okay, first of all, what are you doing in there? Because you're probably not handicapped, so get out of the handicapped bathroom. But if you are in a handicapped bathroom because it's the only one left or whatever, think about the setup. Yeah, it might be bigger because that's the law, but what happens when you close the door? If you think about it, is it too long, too wide? Is the sink actually positioned right? Is the soap thing something that everybody can reach if you're sitting? And if you are in a chair, can you transfer up or down or across to the toilet, well, or even be at the sink at a height that the mirror works for you? Or those ridiculous blower dryers that are right next to the sink that are unfortunately a little too close to for anybody, because then they go off while you're there and it's going to pick up the sense of the chair. Or even if there are paper towels, which I can't stand bathrooms that don't have paper towels, but pet peeve of mine, if they do, is the little eye that you wave these days able to be seen, or is it still an old style one where you have to press a button, and is that out of reach? Or is the toilet paper holder, too close, too high, too low to the bar that it could actually knock into the person when they go to move? So I didn't start thinking about this stuff until I had to. And then it made me crazy because they're not built the same. They're built to specs of minimum code. Then I started looking up stuff, and I found out that in 1974, which is really a long time ago, I'm vintage 74, so I can say that, that's when the law changed that if you make an external, not internal, an external change to a building that's considered a business or a public venue, then you must make it handicapped accessible. So, like, let's say you have, an old church or an old hall or an old store, if you don't change the outside, I mean, you could put up a sign and paint, but if you physically alter a door or any kind of physicality to the building or the physical plan, then you have to put in, ramps or whatever. But if you don't, and you just like give it a facelift aesthetically, but you can completely rechange the inside of the store, you don't ever have to do anything to the outside. So there's a lot just from age, and cost efficiency. I understand that too from a business perspective, but you're not legally required to change it. So that takes a lot of people out of the equation. But people look at it like it's a marginal thing because, well, there's just not that many people that are unable to use the facility, so, oh well. And, I'm torn on that too because that's not right. I feel like everybody should be able to do everything in a society that's as 24/7 as we are. Everything should be accessible to everyone these days. I mean, with technology as it is, I think the last year has proven that, but what do I know? So we go in, we go to Bennigan's, we have a nice night, everything's fine. We go to the movies. Now I'm already on edge because we had the ice snow problem, but we got through the glitch. We go to the movies. And we went to the movies a lot. And I love the movies anyway, so it didn't bother me. But like I said, it was the choice place to go because it was what worked for him. I don't even remember the movie that we were watching that night because I was so angry, but we went a lot. I mean, we were there pretty much every time he was out. And, once a month turned into once every week, turned into as much as we could go because it was the only real social thing that we could do. At the time, the multiplex theaters started to become a thing. So back in the day, there were Sam Eric twins. And there was no such thing as AMC and Regal, really. I mean, maybe in New York, but not here. So Sam Eric twins were basically two movie houses. It was one movie, movies per se, one cinema with two theaters in each town. And that was that. So I was kind of used to that. And it was usually the big theater and the little theater. And they would typically play like a kid's thing or a family show. And then like whatever the happening thing was, it could have been rated R or whatever. And that was the same stuff all around town. But sometimes the movies would switch and they would bring them from town to town. And you could go to this place this day and that. And eventually, by the late 80s, early 90s, the multiplexes start to come into play. And you see these huge cinemas with 10, 12, 14, 20 theaters built in. So you might have 3 or 4 theaters playing Star Wars or something super popular, and then 10 other movies. So that was cool for convenience. And of course, they put stuff in it. So now there's like a mini arcade. You could get coffee. The concessions are all built up. There's your little claw machine. There's, cafes in some of them. At the time, none of them served liquor and had food, but now they do. And they have taverns and make a thing out of it. But a seat that reclined with a cup holder was a huge deal at the time, whereas now we have recliner seats with trays and cups. But at the time, that was just starting to be in vogue. Well, we went to one of these movie plexes, and I won't say which, but I will tell you that I'm a big Regal fan now, so do the math on that. And I would go all the time, and it really bothered me because they wouldn't accommodate this situation over and over again. It's like you knew I'm going to be there. I would even go in early if I had to. And back then, sometimes you had to buy tickets earlier because you couldn't buy online. There was no online. So we go in, and the protocol, for lack of better wording, was you just sit in the aisle. If you got a full house, rather than sell out, kids would just sit on the floor behind the seats in the theater. And that was totally fine. Again, I say protocol loosely because there was no real answer. There was no assigned plan. There was no policy. I mean, technically that's illegal, fire hazard, and you shouldn't do it anyway. But that's what everybody did. Just like I went home driving on mom's lap from the hospital as a newborn, because what are seatbelts? I get it. But it's what we did. So they didn't really plan on wheelchairs. There was no plan for wheelchairs. There was no space for wheelchairs. There was no designated area for wheelchairs. So I would just sit on an aisle seat, and then he would sit next to me and literally roll up next to me so he's in the aisle. Now, the aisles are pretty wide. I mean, it's a movie theater. But that was that. And 99 times out of 100, nobody bothered us for months. But once in a while, when the little dude would come and walk the house and check out to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, once in a while, they would kind of stop or pause or look as if to be like, he really shouldn't be there, but I'm not going to say anything. Probably because I was shooting that person a nasty look, like, open your mouth and it'll be the last words you say. But, whatever. This goes on for months. Well, eventually this night, as my luck would have it, after the snow and ice lift of Bennigan's, where I'm already tweaked up to be crazed, we're at the theater. I don't even remember what we're watching. I just remember I didn't like it anyway, so it's probably better off. And he's in the aisle, a million people in the back of the theater. And this, I don't want to say this kid, because I wasn't much older. I was probably, 18, 19, 20 at the time. And this younger person, but maybe 20, 22, clearly a assistant manager wannabe who thinks he's more important than he should be, was walking the theater with a little night light wand, and he stops. And there's a million people on the floor behind the seats that shouldn't be, but he says to my buddy, "Sir, you're a fire hazard. You're going to have to go. You're in the way, and you just can't be here." And not only did he say it in a fairly normal pitched voice, a volumed voice, but of course it drew attention. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? First of all, we're midway through the movie. Secondly, where exactly would you like him to go? And this kid makes up this new rule I've never heard and says, well, our policy is that the designated area is behind the last seat in the theater for handicapped people. So he says very calmly, well, that's fine. I'll move if you need me to. However, there's a ton of kids back there on the floor, sitting on the floor. So I couldn't fit back there. I couldn't be back there. I didn't want to hurt anybody. He's like, well, then I guess you'll have to leave. No. You didn't really just say that. And half of me is so stupefied that I'm watching a movie in my head because I can't believe this is happening. And the other half of me is thinking, okay, don't hit him. Don't hit him. Don't hit him. Cross your arms. Don't hit him. So he's looking like, chop, chop, gotta move. And I said, do not move, to my friend. And I look at the guy. I said, you and I are going to go outside. And we're going to have a little conversation right now. And he's like, there's nothing to do. I'm just telling you he needs to move. He's a fire hazard. I said, say fire hazard one more time. Go get me your boss. Meet me outside this theater. And we're going to have a little talk. And he tried to push back again, and I was already standing at this point. And I looked at him like, flinch, and it's over for you, and you will be living in the hospital. So he moves, and he goes and gets the guy, and he comes outside. Now, the actual manager is a 40-something normal person who doesn't think he's more important than he is and realizes that this kid is a jerk. And obviously, customer service was not his forte, nor should you talk to, anyone like that, commanding and demanding you're a fire hazard and, you're evil and must be destroyed. So we get outside, and I said, this person needs to go away and not be part of this conversation. You actually should fire him for poor customer service and serious lack of human decency, but that's your prerogative later. Right now, you and I are going to have a talk about my handicapped friend in there who's sitting in the only place available because you didn't clear the back of your fire hazard theater. You want to talk about fire hazards? How about all the 30 kids sitting in the back that you are letting sit there that you probably don't even know is going on because they just do it all the time? And if that's going to go on, that's fine. I don't care. But don't bother me because my actually handicapped friend is in his own wheelchair and there's no physical place for me to go. I can't put him in one of your theater chairs. So what do you suggest? So the guy says, give me 1 second. He goes in, assesses, sees that I'm right, comes back out. I am so sorry. He gives me tickets for like the next 20 shows. I think that guy did end up getting fired, but it wasn't in front of me, unfortunately. And he was like, they're way behind. The law doesn't say that we actually had to construct with this, which was true. I had gone looking it up. I went crazy. Back then, we had these cool places where you could find information. They were called libraries, and there were these things inside that gave you the information. They were called books. It was really cool. Sometimes you'd even find a more up-to-date one that were journals and articles and magazines. They were even published like sooner. So, fun fact. Now with the internet, I know people forgot about that, but that's where I got my information. It was cool. Needless to say, he took every ounce of my angst and saw it, read it, and he said, look, what do you want to do? I know you're here all the time. I'm sorry you got treated that way. I apologize. You know, he gave us like whatever, popcorn, tickets to the next show. We were so annoyed we left, but we did stay for the movie, but then we left. I didn't want to like make a scene, but we were like, okay, we'll come back, you know, in the future. I said, but something has to be done about this. So that guy was cool enough to me to listen, to help write a petition. So I started writing letters like crazy. Started with the local congressman, started with the townships, trying to get, you know, curb cutouts just in normal. I mean, they're everywhere now, but you don't really see them back then. You didn't see them then. But just a curb cutout on a sidewalk was a big deal. Now, that shouldn't have been a big deal. I would think that's obvious. Even if for nothing else than the general practical use of parents and a stroller for a baby, which obviously has wheels, or any human that doesn't want to carry 27 bags and has like a little cart or luggage, or, you know, we have these little rolly laptop cases or anything like that, briefcases on wheels or actual luggage if you're going to the airport. I mean, sure, the airport had cutouts because they were used to rolling things. But if you weren't thinking about it, the average street didn't have curb cutouts or accessibility or any kind of countdown for lighting for crossing, or even for people that are blind, like people with visual impairments, they have the noise making, it makes like a chirp to cross the road. That's in place now, but it wasn't at the time. And by no means am I some massive pioneer for the United States of America, but I can tell you that in Pennsylvania, I went bananas in Delco and I said, no, you got to fix this. And I wrote a lot of letters, and all of a sudden, one by one, you started to see his street got curb cutouts. You know, and his family too was great with this. I kind of took it more on the social level. They did it more on the living area level, residentially. You know, I contacted restaurants. I talked to them directly. I pretty much threatened them in a nice way and made them an offer they can't refuse, Godfather style. I basically said, I wouldn't want to have to stop coming here because you're not accessible, or anybody in the media to know that you weren't willing to work with us, even if it was just us to kind of start spearheading an idea to make more restaurants aware and fix their mistakes that are outdated. And of course, everybody I knew was like, oh, yes, of course, because you wouldn't want to be like, no, and then you're a jerk. So people did. And I have to say, 6 or 7 of the local restaurants, obviously people I knew personally, that owned places, and I was always in entertainment, so I was lucky that way that I knew enough people to be able to do that really started their own business. And then I would put up, rather than be negative, I would try to be positive and put up the info that people did. These people are handicap accessible and they are willing to do that. But back then, you know, with no internet, now it probably would have been, I don't know, a blog or something, or some sort of website that you could go to, and probably would have been a .org. But at the time, it was like flyers and word of mouth and making phone calls and writing letters and handing out information to people. And then they would tell 2 friends, and you'd post in the Acme board. And that's how we did it. And it got around because a lot of other people were really cool and called and thanked or helped and contributed things we didn't know and got other places to do it. And eventually, you started to see the theaters have cutouts and a space that had a little handicap symbol on it. And eventually then we kind of said, okay, that's great. You got a handicap row, but what about the people that come with them? So then they improved that, and they put a little barrier around the area, and it was, you know, a handicap spot. And then there'd be a companion seat that was a quote unquote normal seat next to it. Or sometimes they'd put a bench seat next to it, which was even better because not everybody fits in a standard seat. So you could have like a family or a bigger person, you know, be next to somebody that was there in a wheelchair in a space. And then we kind of took it a step further and we said, okay, well, that's great that they're there and thank you for putting them in. Did you notice they're all at the back of the theater? What about if we hadn't maybe put some in the front of the theater? And then it went eventually to the middle of the theater as well. So, you know, the whole theater is obviously not handicap accessible, but there's options. Just like any other normal, quote unquote, person would get to have options. If somebody told you that you can only eat chocolate ice cream for the rest of your life, and you're really into butter pecan or strawberry or mint chocolate chip, you're going to be pretty annoyed. So why should anyone have to go through that kind of feeling? Eventually, it took over. But I have to say, in my experience, although they all did it, Regal jumped on the bandwagon faster. And as far as I go and the people I know and I've dealt with, I made a big movie switch. And I spent a lot of time, effort, money, and energy on this in the early 90s. And I have to say that Regal was the fastest to respond. Regal was the most responsive in the sense that they did above and beyond more and it went out globally to their theaters faster than any other chain that I saw. And even so to the average client, because then they started making more, accommodations for everyone, and then more conveniences that would also benefit, all people, handicapped or not, capable or not. And whether that's recliners or trays or just different concessions, more concessions, being able to purchase your tickets ahead of time, special deals, certain nights where they might do they had an Avengers night where it's a whole weekend. You could actually go watch every single Avengers movie for $40 flat, and soda and popcorn and hot dogs the whole weekend. I mean, that's a good deal. 20 movies, come on. So they would do things like that, and they would have people come around to people, not just in handicap sessions, but everywhere. And they would give out, tickets every so often. And of course they had promos and programs to get people to go back to the theater in general, but they also incorporated them for others. And I have to say that because especially now in a time where I'm really at a deficit, because I love movies and concerts and Broadway and Mickey World. And I miss all that at the moment because nothing's quite normal, in restaurants and eating out and museums and art in general. And I feel that everything that's been partially taken away or quasi taken away, it's hard when that's your thing, that's your lifeline. That's a lot of people in service there. That's a lot of aesthetic going away. That's a lot of emotion going away, and it'll come back, but until it does, it's not easy, because if that's the outlet that people utilize, where else are you going to go? I mean, that was where we took my buddy. And I know he's having a hard time right now. I certainly am. And chair or not, it's not cool. So don't forget those places. And more importantly, don't dismiss them. Because just since things got weird and they had to go a certain way, that's for safety. And I get it. You lock down, you do what you got to do. But then eventually the hope, of course, is that things return normally at some point, whenever that is. But you don't just dismiss movie theaters and start streaming online because it's easier to be a couch potato. Not that I don't do that. I do that all the time. But I still go. It's a different experience. And that's the whole point. It is an experience. I'm not saying you're not having an experience being a couch potato at your house, and you could have a party there and people get theater rooms, and that's all great. But if you're into the movies, if you love the movies, personally I love seeing little film dude and that big old cup of Coca-Cola getting filled up every time, and the silly little short films that they play. And that's a reason for me to go, just to see that. But it's the experience. It's going. It's the big screen. It's the THX Dolby sound. It's the whole nine, and it's being out. And for some people, that's the only out that they could have. So I bring that to you, and hopefully a bit of awareness. Open a door for somebody. Do that for anyone. But especially if you do encounter someone handy-capable, they might need a little more help, and that's okay. But scowling at them, looking at them stupidly, or doing nothing and ignoring them is really not the way to go. I promise you they're people too, and they're normal. And I promise you that they will respond like a normal human. And they'll probably be pleasantly surprised if you are willing to help. I mean, I can remember just basic things going in and out of a door where I was pushing him, and I would back him through one door so I could sort of tap the door out. But I obviously couldn't get to a double door set. And so many people would run to help, and that's great. But then there are people that just walked on by, and I was like, oh, wait, okay, stay, and I'd have to leave him in the middle of the double door set to go open the other door and then kind of pull him forward. That's ridiculous. In Earth, that should not happen. It's just one of those things. So I can't tell you to be a nice person. I am telling you to be a nice person, but I can't make somebody grow a conscience. But I think that just awareness and observation is really the big part of it. By the way, he's doing fine, and has a great life and is thriving, and it hasn't stopped him from doing anything that he wanted to do. He's happily married, and works with kids actually that have gone through what he has, and he's a teacher, he's a counselor, a mentor, and he's a great one. And he's still got the same wonderful personality that he always did. He's just as snarky and sarcastic as he's been, or we rival each other that way, and he does know it's better to make light of something than make a disaster and be sad. But he's had some obstacles, and I wouldn't have known it unless I went through it. And I thank him for that, because as much as I wish it didn't happen to him, it did put a whole new perspective for me. So with that, kudos to Regal Movie Theater, kudos to Thomas Jefferson Hospital in Philly and McGee Rehab, and kudos to that guy that helped me out at the theater back then, and all the people that have made an effort to help with accommodating all humans, because everybody's got something that they need help with. I don't care who it is, and you could always help, so can't help too much. Not a bad thing. It's interesting. I was watching The Greatest Show on Earth, or Greatest Showman on Earth, whatever that was, with Hugh Jackman, just last night, actually. And it was a good movie, but there was a quote at the end that they put up on screen from P.T. Barnum, who apparently said, and I'm paraphrasing here, the single most noble thing, or the noblest thing that a person can do, is make other people happy. And I just took that really to heart. I think that's very true, because people get confused a lot of times with the golden rule. They say, well, treat others like you wanted to be treated. That's actually not terribly accurate. You should treat others as they want to be treated, because a lot of people treat themselves pretty badly, and they just, in an effort of even caring, sometimes they kind of inadvertently hurt, sabotage, or abuse themselves. If you like today's episode, then check us out at the eclecticcollectionpodcast.com, or follow us on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia. Thanks for listening.